And during the Pilsudski times, the favored Jewish party was the Aguda, or the Orthodox Party, which was a combination of great Hasidic Rebbes like the Gerer Rebbe and great Litvische Rabbonim, Lithuanian rabbis like Chaim Moiser Grodzinski, the Chofetz Chaim. And in the interwar period, the Aguda showed a great deal of dynamism. It established, it acted on the suggestion of Sarah Schneerer and established the Beis Yaakov schools for girls, understanding finally that Jewish girls really do need a systematic religious education. It established summer camps, it established newspapers. The Aguda showed a great deal of willingness to modernize. By the way, Polish Zionism also had many achievements. The Tarbut schools, a network of Hebrew schools all over Poland, where the level of Hebrew instruction was first rate. Youth movements like Hashomer Hatzair and Dror, Akiba, Gordonia, 100,000 Jewish immigrants to Palestine, which made a great deal of difference. So these Jewish political parties, obviously, they had no hope of gaining power or of even sharing power, but yet they established mini worlds which were very effective in their own constituency. Now, Pilsudski liked the Aguda because the Aguda didn't make waves. The Aguda didn't engage in this nonsense about minority rights, about Jewish right to do this and Jewish right to do that. The Aguda said, Shah Shtil, we're in exile. We want to be left alone. We want to be able to live as Jews, to have kosher meat, to have our Jewish schools, and to be able to make a living. And Pilsudski met them some of the way. He gave the Aguda protection. He favored the Aguda in local Jewish politics. There was a new Kehillah law in 1928 governing elections to local Jewish councils, and there was one article that said that delegates who were disrespectful of the Jewish religion could be disqualified. And of course, you know how solicitous Orthodox rabbis are of protecting the Jewish religion, and the Aguda acted very aggressively to make sure that Bundists and Zionists got kicked off these Jewish councils. And as a sign of gratitude, the Polish government helped in the building of the Lublin Yeshiva. Not a lot of help, but when the yeshiva was dedicated in 1930, there were a lot of Polish officials there, and Meyer Shapiro, who had begun the Daf Yomi and who had played a major role in organizing Orthodoxy, was a great supporter of Pilsudski's. Now, the great days of the Aguda, as we'll see, ended in 1936. After Pilsudski died, the Aguda was rewarded for its loyalty by facing a law passed by the Polish parliament severely restricting kosher slaughter, which was a real slap in the face, because the Aguda had believed in the politics of Shah Shtil. You make nice with the Poles, Dina de Malchusa Dina, the law of the state is the state. This is Poland, the Poles are in charge, we don't make any claims, just let us live as Jews. And that worked under Pilsudski, it didn't work under his successors. And by the way, in 1939, if you look at the records of the Polish Sejm, if you look in January 1939, what was the biggest problem facing Poland, if you just base it on the records of the Polish parliament? Jewish kosher slaughter. Now, very soon the Poles discovered they had other problems, but this is what they were talking about then. Now, when Pilsudski died in 1935, there was a power vacuum. His successors were midgets compared to him. Polish Jews felt this was really bad news. This was not good for the Jews, and they were absolutely right. When Pilsudski died, the not only did the Polish Nationalist Party become more strident, but you now began to have extreme right-wing organizations, especially strong among students, who were now saying, look at Hitler. He knows how to handle the Jews. He's making life miserable for them. He's depriving them of citizenship, and they're getting the hell out of Germany. Why are we coddling them with kid gloves? And you now began to have organizations like the ONR that started to beat Jews up in the streets and engage in anti-Jewish violence. And a lot of this drew its energy from the example of Nazi Germany. Pilsudski's successors were afraid of losing support to these people, and so they now began to play up to the anti-Semites. Pogroms broke out in Poland in 1935 and 36. Pszytek, Pinsk Mazowiecki, a pogrom in Brześć in 1937. The Polish government made it very clear it did not approve of violence. But the Polish prime minister, in a speech in 1936, said, we do not approve of violence because, now listen carefully, I'm quoting directly, a host does not mistreat a guest in his own house. Notice the wording. The Jews are now guests, and guests should not overstay their welcome. We do not approve of violence, but economic struggle, ovshem. What does ovshem mean? Of course, please. So in a sense, the Polish government now seemed to be endorsing an economic boycott of Jews. The Catholic Church was asked by rabbis to come out in defense of Jews. And so there was a pastoral letter, and the pastoral letter said, even though Jews are active in pornography, in crime, in white slavery, and even though many Jews undermine the morals of Polish youth, nevertheless, there are still many good Jews. And at any rate, it is forbidden to beat them. So this was the great pastoral letter against pogroms. And so the pace of anti-Jewish violence began to increase on the eve of World War II. And as I said before, this left the Bund as the most active Jewish party, which got increasing support from Polish Jews at the very end. Because the Bund had always said, our home is here. The Bund was the only Jewish party that had a non-Jewish ally, the PPS, the Polish Socialists. Polish Socialists didn't love Jews, but they, at least officially, came out against anti-Semitism. The Bund organized defense groups to defend Jews on the streets. And the Bund basically said, you want us to leave? Screw you, we're staying. And the Bund also showed the Jewish people in Poland that they cared about their lives. The Bund organized a sanitarium for sick Jewish kids, the Medem Sanitarium. The Bund organized Yiddish schools. The Bund organized daycare centers. The Bundist youth group, Zukunft, became increasingly popular. One point to remember about the Bund is that Polish Jewry in the 1930s was changing its socioeconomic character. That is, more and more little Jewish shopkeepers, more and more little Jewish merchants were now working in factories or in piecework. The Jews were becoming proletarianized. And that was a factor in the rise of the Bund. Another factor was that the other parties seemed to have run out of gas. Zionism was compromised by the White Paper and the restrictions on immigration, the Arab riots. The Aguda was compromised by the kosher slaughter restrictions. Communism, which probably had about 5% of the Jewish vote. It's hard to know, but about 5%, because that's what we know from 1928. Communism was compromised by the Purge trials and by Stalin's decision to dissolve the Polish Communist Party in 1938. And so that left the Bund as the only game in town. And one Zionist commentator said in 1938, when the Bund won spectacular victories in the last elections, Die Juden haben gestimmt für den Bund, eilendig sich zu Mincha. The Jews voted for the Bund on their way to Mincha, which means that the Jews didn't become Marxists, but they supported the Bund because the Bund was basically saying, we're going to fight for our right to stay here as self-respecting citizens.